The Queen tests positive for COVID but expects to continue with light duties in the days ahead. She's said to be experiencing mild symptoms after contracting the virus weeks away from her 96th birthday. Meanwhile, a plan for COVID in England due tomorrow will include reduced testing and no legal requirement to self-isolate. Tens of thousands of homes in England and Wales are still cut off from power supplies after Storm Eunice.
Great Britain have won the Olympic title.
And a gold at last in the final hours of the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Good afternoon. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen, who is 95, has tested positive for COVID-19. In a statement, she was said to be experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expecting to continue with light duties at Windsor Castle in the coming week. She is the third member of the royal family to have contracted the virus in recent days, as our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell explains.
I'm here.
Windsor Castle on Wednesday, the Queen meeting defence officials. The only health issue then was to do with her mobility.
Good morning, Your Majesty. How are you?
Well, as you can see, I can't move.
Oh, well, many congratulations on the start of your...
That exclamation, "I can't move," is thought to indicate that she may be having knee or hip trouble. But now, after 2 years of careful shielding from the risk of COVID, it's clear that the virus has penetrated Windsor Castle. Several staff have tested positive, and so has the Queen. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, Her Majesty is experiencing mild cold-like symptoms, but expects to continue light duties at Windsor over the coming week. She will continue to receive medical attention and will follow all the appropriate guidelines. Those light duties are expected to include continuing with the paperwork as head of state. Shortly after the palace confirmed that the Queen had COVID, she sent a message congratulating the Team GB women's and men's curling teams on their medals at the Winter Games. The main concerns of the Queen's doctors will focus around the fact that she's now just 9 weeks from her 96th birthday.
Any person of that age will need to be monitored fairly carefully. And also, I think, given antivirals, we do know that if you give antivirals early on in an illness, you can substantially reduce the risk of severe disease.
The Queen is thought to have been fully vaccinated against COVID, and if she is given antiviral drugs, they should protect against serious illness. Political leaders were quick to tweet their good wishes. The Prime Minister said, "I'm sure I speak for everyone in wishing Her Majesty the Queen a swift recovery from COVID and a rapid return to vibrant good health." The leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, tweeted, "On behalf of myself and the whole of @UK Labour, wishing Her Majesty the Queen good health and a speedy recovery. Get well soon, ma'am." In recent days, both the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall have tested positive for COVID. The Prince, who met his mother at Windsor on the 8th of February, has already made a full recovery. It is to be hoped that his mother will do the same. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
Well, the news from Buckingham Palace comes as ministers prepare to unveil a new plan for living with COVID in England, including ending the legal requirement for people to self-isolate after testing positive. Labour has accused the government of declaring victory before the war is over. Our health editor Hugh Pym reports.
A new direction, moving ahead without legal restrictions. But today's developments underline again that the virus can still spread. The requirement to self-isolate after a positive test is set to be scrapped in England following tomorrow's announcement. But there have been warnings that detailed guidance for the public will be needed.
Restrictions can end, but we need that to happen with provisions for people that are clinically vulnerable. We need that to happen for those that need to take time off work to be able to do that safely, both for their health and their finances. So there needs to be an awful lot of planning around this. It cannot be as simple as restrictions end for everyone. This is Freedom Day for everyone.
The latest survey by the Office for National Statistics suggests that just under 3 million people in the UK had the virus in the week ending February the 12th. That was lower than the peak, but still relatively high. But with daily COVID hospital admissions, there's been a continuing downward trend from over 2,000 at one stage to closer to 1,000 a day. The Prime Minister said today that testing would be at a much lower level and PCR testing sites are likely to be wound down. Though Boris Johnson said the ability to monitor the virus would be maintained. Free lateral flow test kits are likely to be cut back, with availability only in certain settings and for those most at risk.
There was clearly this concept of...
And the NHS is trying to move forward after intense COVID pressure.
It is time to recover. It is time to try and get things back to normality. I'm afraid this virus is with us. We are inevitably going to see more variants emerge in the fullness of time. But we have better tools of dealing with this, both in the community and in hospital. That's probably going to be okay.
Hospital staff will hope that responsible public behaviour will continue as the government's plan for living with COVID is implemented. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Let's bring you more now on the Queen, because our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell is here in the studio now, talking about living with COVID on the one hand, and then this reminder of the virus reaching people in every part of society.
They have shielded her so successfully for very nearly 2 years now, mostly, of course, at Windsor, forming this bubble around her, staff testing all the time, small numbers of staff working in relays. But clearly things are relaxing, and the virus has got into the castle. Several members of staff there, we understand, have tested positive, and now the Queen. According to Buckingham Palace, the symptoms are mild. She is fully vaccinated, we believe, though they won't confirm that, and there is the option of these antiviral drugs. The imponderable factor, of course, in all of this is her age, 95, nearly 96. And age equals vulnerability in this situation, obviously. Now, that must be, I would imagine, the principal area of concern for the royal doctors, led by Professor Sir Hugh Thomas, the medical household. No regular bulletins from Buckingham Palace. That's just not how they operate. They won't be giving us updates. If they have something to say, they will say it. So, at the end of what has been an unsettling week for the royal family, it is clearly the determination of the Queen to carry on. She expects, as the palace has said, to continue with light duties, so the paperwork and virtual audiences.
Nick, thank you very much. Nearly 80,000 homes in England and Wales are still cut off from power supplies in the wake of Storm Eunice. The southwest and the southeast are likely to be the last to be reconnected. And now another storm, Franklin, is on its way. James Reynolds reports.
In South Manchester, the Environment Agency has issued a risk-to-life flood warning. It will evacuate hundreds of homes in the East Didsbury area. Pravin Gorajala and his son have come out to check the water level for themselves.
Our house is just pretty much on the edge of the river, so we're probably at quite high risk of any flooding, if there is any, hopefully not.
In the west of England, more than 20,000 properties remain without power.
Thank you so much.
Caroline Bullock and her 91-year-old mother Kathleen have had to rely on the help of neighbours.
Friends have been fantastic in bringing us thermoses of hot water for hot water bottles to keep my mother warm.
The village of Wadhurst in Kent lost power on Friday morning. Repairs are slow. 80-year-old Carol Robbins hasn't had any official help.
Normally, at someone my age, they term me as vulnerable, so they would ring or send text, but I've heard nothing from anyone. So I have no means of finding out, other than other people, when it might come back on.
These pictures of rising water levels were taken today in Bakewell, near the River Wye in the Derbyshire Dales. Storm Eunice will now be followed by Storm Franklin.
The Met Office has issued another amber weather warning. This is for Storm Franklin. It's actually for the north coast of Northern Ireland, and it's valid from midnight tonight until 7 a.m. Monday morning, where we're going to see potential gusts of winds in excess of 80 miles an hour. But I also want to stress that we could see damaging gusts of winds once again across southern Scotland, northern England and parts of Wales.
In Omagh in Northern Ireland, water levels have risen, and the wider area now braces for the strong winds of Storm Franklin. James Reynolds, BBC News.
Well, more now on what is yet to come. Northern Ireland is expected to bear the brunt of that new storm, Franklin, and our correspondent Emma Vardy joins us from Newtownards. How severe is it likely to be, Emma?
Well, it's feeling pretty gusty already, let me tell you, and it's expected to get quite a bit worse. Winds of up to 80 miles per hour predicted in Northern Ireland's coastal areas, and it's really forecast to feel the strongest of all the winds of all parts of the UK when Storm Franklin peaks here, which is expected to be overnight and into the early hours of tomorrow morning. Now, Northern Ireland's already experienced quite a lot of disruption today. Flooding, roads closed in various areas, and there's predicted to be more travel disruption ahead, potentially some disruption to the ferries that are crossing the Irish Sea. Now, meteorologists have tried to explain as to why we're getting such a battering at the moment. I'm told it's because there's a very active jet stream that is driving storms towards the UK. We had Storm Dudley on Wednesday, Storm Eunice on Friday, and now Storm Franklin today. So I think once again it's time to batten down those hatches, because here in Northern Ireland that amber weather warning is in place overnight until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
We'll let you get in. Emma Vardy, thank you very much. And your local radio station will have all the detail for where you live. You can find it via bbc.co.uk/sounds. The French government has said that President Putin of Russia is prepared to pursue a diplomatic solution to the crisis over Ukraine. He and President Macron spoke today as Russia continued to carry out military exercises close to Ukraine's northern border with Belarus. Our Eastern Europe correspondent Sarah Rainsford reports from the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
These drills in Belarus were meant to end with Russian tanks rolling back to their bases. But all this firepower is now staying put indefinitely, not far from Ukraine's border. In a crisis that's all about signalling, this is Russia refusing to de-escalate.
Let's really take a moment to understand the significance of what we're talking about. It's been over 70 years. And through those 70 years, as I mentioned yesterday, there has been peace and security. We are talking about the real possibility of war in Europe.
Russia is talking up the danger too, helping evacuate women and children from the breakaway regions of Ukraine it controls, claiming Kiev is planning an attack there. So President Macron phoned Vladimir Putin today. The Kremlin did agree to continue seeking a diplomatic solution, but its troops are still in place, despite the threat of sanctions.
And we have to accept at the moment that Vladimir Putin is possibly thinking illogically about this and doesn't see the disaster ahead. And I think it's vital for us all now to get over what a catastrophe it would be for Russia.
But for Russia, this is all about pulling Ukraine back into its orbit.
8 years ago, Ukrainians came out in huge numbers on this very square to demand their independence, the right to decide their own future and direction without Moscow dictating. They paid a really heavy price for that, but the feeling is stronger than ever now.
So they're preparing to resist here any way they can. This was self-defense for women for a wartime scenario. Pretty extreme, but so are the predictions of Western governments in this crisis. Sarah Rainsford, BBC News, Kiev.
Football now, and England's women have drawn 0-0 with Spain in the Arnold Clark Cup at Norwich City's Carrow Road. England's best chance of the game came just after half-time when Lauren Hemp hit the post. England faced Germany on Wednesday in their third match of the round-robin competition. And in the final hours of the Winter Olympics in China, Team GB have won a gold medal. The women's curling team beat Japan a day after the men won a silver. The Games have now closed with thousands of athletes parading through the Bird's Nest Stadium in Beijing. Andy Swiss reports.
Dream come true for myself and for the rest of the girls as well. Like it's been a journey to get here for Olympic.
Oh, and it's crashed! They've crashed! Aside from their 2 medals in the curling, though, the truth is Britain have struggled here.
Their target was between
pointed that, you know, we're not going to hide away from that. It would have been nice to have achieved some medals on the snow and also on the skeleton and bobsleigh. So we'll go home and we'll make sure we review that properly and understand what happened.
Suitably, it was the curlers that led the British team into the closing ceremony.
And so the end of the games, which were contentious before they even began, taking place against the backdrop of COVID and concerns over both sustainability and China's human rights record.
Cleared to compete after failing a drugs test. But despite everything, the head of the Olympics said the games were exceptional and the athletes an example. Andy Swiss, BBC News, Beijing.
That's it from us. We're back with the late news at 10 o'clock. Now on BBC One, time for the news wherever you are. Goodbye.